Hi, Jennifer Stewart here, and I'm so glad to have with me today as part of the iShine Bright series, Shonnie Lavender. How are you doing today, Shonnie?
I'm doing really well. I got to do a folk dance with my daughter and all her classmates, so I had a great morning.
Oh, I love
good
it. That's
good way to start your day.
for sure.
Sashaying and do-si doing was second. Yeah,
I love that. So, and I wanted to introduce Shani to all of our listeners. So, Shani Lavender supports conscious parents to create connected, respectful, and thriving families by eliminating fear based parenting methods. Oh, fear is real for sure, that are still commonly in use today. Shani and her work have appeared on the Huffington Post, the Elephant Journal, Parent.com, and numerous podcasts and radio shows. She professionally holds a master's degree, did her coach training at Coach U, and received her coaching accreditation through the International Coach Federation. So I love everything that you have been sharing with parents, Shani. I know we have so much in common with helping parents to
yeah,
understand their kids and build relationships and help them
yeah.
to grow to be the best they can be. So, and I
Yeah, absolutely. Fun stuff, fun and important work for sure, Jennifer.
definitely. And I always like to ask, I think it's good for the listeners to know, like, what got you started into your current journey with helping people with conscious parenting?
I love that you say current journey, which is, to me is really, I think part of that conscious mindset. It's like there is a journey. And sometimes we think, well, it should be this linear point A, B, C. And yet often it's circuitous and meandering in different ways. So anyway, um, I have been working as a coach since the early 2000s, so almost 20 years. And mostly with women, individual coaching, and then I did corporate work. But there's always underlying, there was that pure growth standpoint, about how do we become our fullest selves and live to our fullest potential. Well, when I became a mom 8.5 years ago, I really saw that, oh, if you would like to grow yourself, become a parent. I mean, that's not a reason to have a child, but it really is, to me, probably one of the only chosen ways that people would actively think, oh, I want to, heal my old wounds and reach my potential and see things in new ways. I think other ways to do that are to get a serious illness, to have a major relationship challenge, divorce or separation, maybe lose a job, so most of the things that can spark that deep growth and deep awareness and learning are not things that most of us, oh yeah, sign me up for that. So parenting, again, it is to me such a vehicle for that. And so I really saw that piece of it, but also the piece where when I looked around me and even myself, that first year of parenthood, my husband and I struggled. We had a super strong relationship prior, and yet we really struggled. And so I saw in myself and in friends and other parents around that, we live in a culture that has no support for parents, really no support. I mean, there's people use phrases and talk about family friendly, and it's like, but there's really none. And so, I think who needs support? Parents, because the way we show up as parents influences the entire course of our children's lives. It sets their mindset, it sets how they're going to think about life, how they're going to view themselves, how they're going to approach challenges and opportunities. So I just said, hey, what fun to get to work on myself and get to support other parents to really have this journey be as fulfilling for us individually and also as nurturing for our children and positive for them as possible. So that's the
Yeah.
long answer to your
No, I love
question,
that.
Jen.
No, that's great. That kids definitely make us grow. I mean, they will definitely point out all of our strengths and our weaknesses, maybe not verbalize them all the time, but they will bring them out within us. I mean, if we're not a patient person originally, that's going to be really apparent when you have a toddler who is begging for that lollipop in the store, right?
Yeah,
They definitely make us
absolutely.
grow. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And not everybody wants to go there as a parent, and that's fine. And yet I think for those parents who are open to that aspect of parenting, it can make it even more rewarding. And actually, I think it makes it easier in challenging times too, which I may say more about that later. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They will, one way or another, they're going to help us see those places where, hey, mom, or hey, dad, I got something for you to work on here.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to happen whether or not we want to address it. They're going to make us grow. So
Yeah.
we can either go with it and embrace the growth, or we can try to fight it. But,
Yeah.
and I think it's nice for people too, to understand like what that maybe are new to this realm, like what is conscious parenting and your idea. I mean, I think there's so many different views on that. I think when you're first hearing about it, I think some people think it means you just let your kids do whatever they want to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So how would you explain that to someone who's just beginning to learn about it?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I think you're also right, Jennifer, where there is like, well, what is this? And does it mean this or this? And I think at one level, it can mean a little bit something different to everybody, because it's not, I don't see it as a cookie cutter. This is the way you have to do it. For me, and I actually have a course on 10 fundamentals of conscious parenting, because I think many people are like, what is this? So for me, I think of it as sort of a couple things put together. It's conscious, just as that word implies, is there is a thoughtfulness and a mindfulness about what are the choices I'm making. So it's not just about, oh, am I feeding my child, or am I going to breastfeed or bottle feed? Yes, that can be part of it. And yet it's a bigger thinking about, how do I want to show up as their parent? What do I want to support them in developing in themselves through this journey that we share together? So it really, to me, encapsulates that bigger mindfulness, but also that moment by moment mindfulness of, wait a minute, why am I making this choice in the moment? Or why am I getting so upset about whatever's happening, But I also think, because I think it's funny, some people could say, why consciously spank my kids, or whatever. It's like, well, no. So I think there's an unspoken part of consciousness, that consciousness for me also implies a loving, gentle, a higher level of relating to another human being. So again, it's not said, it's not like conscious and loving. To me, that aspect though is inside consciousness. It's like, yes, you could consciously do harm to somebody else, but then I don't really think that's conscious. Right. If that makes sense. So again, it's implied, it's not stated outright, but to me, again, you can't say, well, I'm doing all these things and I'm conscious. Well, yeah, you might be aware that you're doing some of it, but if you're doing it out of a negative intention, or you're not striving to be as loving as possible, even though you're human and sometimes you're going to be grumpy and you're going to be mean-spirited, that's different. That's being human. But if your intention isn't to be loving, then to me, that's not conscious.
Right, definitely. So connecting more with your child on an emotional level and trying to understand, like, where do you want them to grow to be, as opposed to just on the external side of things, and connecting with them at who their inner person is. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, not just the external, because I don't want to imply that it's about, okay, I'm going to think about who I want my child to turn out to be. Our children are who they are, and they're meant to be who they're meant to be. So I think about it more in terms of being mindful of, am I supporting who that child is? Am I supporting them to their fullest expression of authenticity and potential? Not just, oh, well, I want them to be really good at sports, or I really want them to have musical aptitude. Well, yeah, but they're not, they're not toys. They're their own human beings. And I see us as parents as we're spiritual partners, not even spiritual leaders in the sense, because I think our children come with so many gifts that they bring to the relationship. And it's not just about, oh, well, I'm the parent and I'm ahead of you and I know more than you. Basically, it's, you're older, I'm older than you.
Yeah.
and I have some more life experience, at least in this life, depending on your views about that. So.
Yeah, no, I love that because I mean that's definitely one of the things that's on my heart lately is this whole idea in society that kids are supposed to do, if everyone on the block is playing soccer or everyone is doing piano, that all the kids should be doing that to be successful. But I mean, I know I have 3 kids of my own and they're all totally different, their own little people. And I could try. And in fact, with my oldest one, I tried to get her to like certain activities for a long time till she was about 8 or 9 years old. And I was like, all right, I give in. She really, really wanted to ride horses, but I was like, oh my gosh, that is not a cheap hobby. So we tried. Yeah. I mean, and she did, a year of competitive soccer even because that's, what everybody was doing. And she liked it, but she didn't shine. And so once she got into her thing now, I mean, she will get up and scrub the house to go out to the barn. I mean, it is her, that's what makes her heart and herself light up. But my other 2 kids have their totally own different, they're all just their own little people. And I love that you said, we can try to make them fit into whatever mold in our head. Maybe we had conceived before the child was born. I'm going to have a kid that's going to do this and this and that. Or
or wouldn't it be good if we could do this because I love to do it and I'd love to do it with them. And they're like, I think that's stupid, And I love, I'm so glad, Jennifer, that you said, it's like we can have our wants. And that's something, especially for parents, if they're new to conscious parenting. I think one of the hardest places for parents is when they choose this path or get interested and think, wow, I want to investigate a little more, is finding that place of honoring ourselves and honoring our children. I think most of the old paradigm parenting still has an either or, like, well, if mama doesn't get rest, then she's going to be unhappy and then the kids will be unhappy. So mama has to get her rest. And it's like, yes. And so I think that sometimes is very hard to navigate at different moments in our lives with our children. And yet I think that is that piece sometimes of saying, what, I really love opera or I love gardening. So I do want to expose my child and invite them in like, hey, do you want to come play in the garden with me? And yet, like you're saying, if we keep getting the feedback from our children and the experiences that they're like, this just doesn't light me up, then it's like, that's okay. And then you can find somebody else to garden with or, So, so I'm really glad you mentioned that.
I love that.
It doesn't have to choose one or the other. It can be both and that just takes practice and skills. And sometimes it's hard to do and it may not be possible in every single moment. And that's okay.
Yeah, no, I love that you can honor them and still honor yourself and your dreams. But I think it's so important for parents not to put their dreams onto their child. So it's hard sometimes, we envision what we think our childhood, could have had that would have been even better. And it's like, well, I'm going to allow my kid to have that. And then sometimes the kid's like, but I don't want that. It's like, oh, you don't want the same dream? Okay.
Where I don't,
Yeah, I love that. And one of the other things I definitely wanted to chat with you about today is this whole topic of boundary setting within conscious parenting. Because I think for a lot of people that one of the biggest stresses is they're like, well, if I don't enforce all of this stuff on the outside for my child, then they're not going to grow up to be respectful. They're not going to grow up to listen. They're not going to make good choices. I think there's this false idea that that we have to have really hard boundaries, but then there's also the confusion sometimes of that is conscious parenting means that we have no boundaries. So I don't know if you could speak into that a little bit, like where is that supposed to be meeting at?
Well, I don't know where it's supposed to be or what it is. I think the analogy that I sometimes use is if you're driving a car, which most of us are familiar with that, right? So you have your lane and that's your boundary, right? You have dotted white or yellow or something on one side, depending on what country you're in. You have something else on the other side or no road. So you know where you're supposed to drive because it's like that now. And it's clear where then other people are meant to drive. Well, somebody can cut into your lane and they've then, quote, invaded or violated a boundary, right? So that's there. And I don't think any of us would say, well, I just sort of let people, I don't mind where they drive. Because I think most of us would be like, no, I sort of want to be alive at the end of my drive. So I think thinking about boundaries like that, it's like they're not a negative thing. They're part of, it's how we keep ourselves safe or help ourselves stay regulated. So just having that more neutral, like it's not an electric shock fence designed to kill somebody. It's just a, demarcation. And then the second piece of that is, so someone comes across that boundary in this analogy, then we have a choice. We can slam on our horn, call them names, flip them the bird. We can do a lot of things because, they violated my boundary. I'm going to teach them. We can do that. And probably all of us have done some degree of that. But it's like, is that really helping us? And so I think this idea of with our children, then if we take that, just the other day, my daughter was really upset and she's 8.5. She was really upset and she was hitting. And so I don't choose to be hit. I don't want to be hit. And she knows that. But, when we're not in our main human brain, that's hard to remember. So I just simply said, I don't want to be hit. And I moved out of her hitting range. I don't need to teach her in that moment. I don't need to punish her. I don't need to do anything but to say, here's the boundary. Here's the white line. That's, so, and again, not always easy to do, but I think from that basic premise of, boundaries are neutral. They're not something that are good or bad. They're there for reasons. And if there's a way to be with them so we can simply help our children see this is a boundary that we have. And sometimes that's helping them understand why we have it. Maybe we have another child who is, auditorily very sensitive. And we help another child learn that, using a lot of loud voice around your brother really makes it challenging for him. So you can explain it. There's lots of different ways we can work with it, but boundaries are part of life. And I think the opportunity as parents is to help our children learn them, but without pain. There just doesn't need to be pain associated with them. It's just, hey, here's a boundary. And frankly, I think that one of the challenges that we have, at least I see this in a lot of my work with moms, and I'd be curious if you see this too, that sometimes what I think is really going on is that we, in this case, as a mom, we want to have a boundary, but part of us has messages about, well, I shouldn't, if I'm a good mom, it should be okay with me that whatever my kids do, or if I have this boundary, that means I'm selfish, whatever those beliefs we have. So then we don't voice a boundary and our child does something. And all the while inside, we're like, they're crossing this boundary, but the kid doesn't know it's there. And so then we're mad and we get mad at them for crossing a boundary that they didn't know was there for us. And so I think really part of the challenge for many moms in particular is being willing to say, what, I do have a boundary around this, or I want this boundary, in our family relationships, and being willing to stand up for that in a bold and strong way, again, without making anybody wrong. It's not like you people are all bad every time you violate it. So does that resonate with you, Jennifer, or your experience with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Several things that you've said definitely resonate. So, one of the last things you were chatting about as far as, having a boundary and then being okay with having it. I know a lot of times I've had people ask me, like, is it okay if I tell my child they cannot do this or do that? And it's like, I know that's out of fear, right? Oftentimes they're afraid that if they enforce that,
right,
that then they're mean, or their child's not going to like them, but it's like, well, it depends. You have to decide beforehand, what are your boundaries? and then be okay with them. I definitely think it's important to think about them when you're not in the heat of the moment and you're not frustrated and upset, because then, we're human too, and we are going to get into that emotional side, and we're going to be wanting to react instead of having a helpful response. So yes, I definitely think that people are, it's hard, you want to be this like loving parent, but then at the same time, there are certain boundaries that are going to be safe and you're going to have to enforce. But I think that one of the other things that you said, which is really important, is remembering not to try to teach the child about the boundary in the heat of the moment, right? Because that part of their brain is not engaged. You're not going to get through to them. Right. And I think it's so hard because that feels like you better do something right then and there. They're doing something to their sibling or whatever. And it's like, well, you need to stop the action if anyone's getting hurt. Safety always, stop that. Right. But then, take a moment and breathe. And then when everybody's calm, right? I mean, that's the time. It's like, okay, let's debrief. Like, what happened there? Yeah. How were you feeling? Yeah. How can we make a different choice next time? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Really leaving that aside. And the other thing, something you said that I wanted to actually bring up too, is that the idea, I think, that some parents struggle with, because again, an old model is we always had to be consistent. Well, we're not. We're human beings. So some days, I'm tired. And so I don't have the bandwidth to, in those moments, sometimes I do, but in general, the more depleted I am, the less reserves I have to be able to show up at my strongest. So being loving towards ourselves as well, and being able to say, you know what, yes, normally we live in an area where I'm like, my daughter plays in the streets, no problem. And yet there may be either other situations, or I actually said to her one time in the last couple of days, I said, I notice sometimes when we're out and about, you cross streets like you do in our street. And I said, that doesn't, I don't think that's always going to be the best choice, that's really going to work. So would you be willing to be really mindful and work with me on, crossing streets when we're out and about? So being able, though, to be attentive in the moment to say, you know what, I'm really tired right now. And I've got 12 things going on. Again, maybe that's not the best choice, but sometimes that's what we're dealing with, right? So to be able to say to our child, you know what, normally I might be okay with this kind of thing. And right now, what I'd really like you to do is stay closer to me, or whatever the thing is, so that we can flex too. Sometimes we have wider boundaries, sometimes more narrow, and that's okay. That doesn't make us, we're wishy-washy. It just means, hey, I'm paying attention in the moment right now. I can be more cool with that. And yesterday I couldn't. So
sure. No, definitely.
That many parents don't think about. They just think, oh, I need to know what my boundary is. Keep it the same all the time. It's like, well, it's not usually so.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely one of the biggest things in conscious parenting, is being connected to our children and knowing that what worked yesterday may not work today, may not work tomorrow. What worked an hour ago may not work right now. I mean, yeah, we have
exactly.
Go with the flow. I mean, I run a preschool right now. And so I know every single day that energy in that room is different. So you have to just be able to have a plan, but be very flexible and completely scrapping it if you need to, and doing what works.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Yeah. Like, okay, what is it like, if you want to make God laugh, tell her your plans, or tell him your plan, that idea, like, oh, here's how it's going to go. Yeah. Oh, I guess not, but again, being willing to say, like, I have some tools and some methods. I'm sure you have this in a preschool classroom. Like, we have circle and we do certain things that help us. And yet, today the kids really seem to have so much energy. We're going to scrap this thing that we normally do, and we're going to do more active stuff to help them get it out.
For sure.
So we need to bring that.
That happens a lot.
I know, preschoolers, right? Even second graders, right? Most kids till they're about 18 still actually need more of that than they get. But that's another conversation.
One of the other things, I definitely wanted to. I started to touch on it, but this there's a lot of fear, I think, in parenting. I think anywhere in life, but since we're chatting about conscious parenting, and I think parents feel so much pressure sometimes that they are the ones responsible for making their child grow up to be a certain way. But the more and more that you get, spend time with children and with parents, you start to learn that it's not parents making the kids be a certain way, but coming alongside them and helping them grow to be the best versions of themselves. So, and I think once parents learn that, like, that's so freeing to know that, like, they're their own little people. It's not completely our responsibility. So I don't know if you could kind of speak into that about how parents can let go of that fear and know that their kids are going to be okay.
Yeah. That, I think that is one of the toughest things, in part because I think that's the main message we get from society is all the bad things, quote unquote, our children do are our fault. And so there is just that whole general frame around a parent's job is to make their kid behave and fit into what society expects children to do, and then older babies to do, and then toddlers to do. At every stage, there are a host of expectations that are out there, and it's the ocean we're in. So, we can work, as like you and I are at this level, we are working to change some of that narrative. And at the same time, it's a big ocean. And so we're not going to shift that culture overnight. So I would say there's several things. Is one, find your tribe and really surround yourself with people who are going to affirm you and help you feel strong, because you know what? Everybody has an opinion. So, nobody has to listen to me. I mean, I love it if you're resonating, that's great. And yet I'm not the expert. You're the expert on you and your family. And so being able to find the people who will help you feel strong. And when you lose your way, like, I don't know, what am I supposed to do? People who will help you find your path and stay on it, because you're going to get plenty of voices that are going to say, oh, that's the wrong, and that, because that's our culture. So I think that's one of the most important and valuable ways to get rid of fear. Number two, and this is that work that we get to do, and it takes extra time, but do that inner work and be really clear about what are the fears that I have specifically. That comes from our own growing up. I grew up, for example, in a family where being appropriate, whatever that means, but there was a meaning behind it when I was growing up, and I had really loving parents. And at the same time, lots of different factors, I really got a picture of, here's how a quote good girl is supposed to behave. And it's a lot of the same messages that girls still get. But nonetheless, I am only going to be able to come free from my fear if I know what specifically my fear looks like. It's about showing up as too big or too loud, whatever. So that's the second thing, is get in touch with really what are your fears? What's scaring you? What are you afraid of? And then the third thing I'd say is practice trusting. And one of the ways I do that is I like to spend some really specific time observing my daughter. And I've done this for years, but like observe quietly and notice that, like, even when she was little and she'd be trying to stack a block, and if she couldn't figure it out or look like the thing was going to topple over, and part of me wants to, like, I want to make it stand up and make, it's like, if we practice that observing, I find that we see that actually most things turn out okay. And for me, that's a big piece of the fear. It's like, oh, I should be doing something, as if I'm, somehow gonna, I have such superpowers that my stepping in is actually going to have a huge effect. It's not that what I do doesn't matter, because it really does. And yet in those day-to-day things, I think so often we're sort of on guard and ready, like, okay, I'm ready to pounce whenever I need to. And if we can just take a step back and be like, I'm here if I am needed. And I can also trust that most of it's going to unfold just fine without me doing anything.
No, I love that. I love that for so many reasons. I mean, if we constantly fix everything for our kids, then we're not allowing them the opportunity to see their talents and their abilities and how they can problem solve and to develop
Mhm.
those skills. So it's so hard, right? Because we want to make everything perfect for our kids. We want this perfect little life, but we want to allow them to grow
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
develop those skills on their own. So I think that's beautiful. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And we can find that, I think I know most of us have that protective mama bear, right? Where we're like, I don't want any pain to befall my child. And that's hard to move away from. I think part of that's really instinctual, right? Like if we
Sure.
don't help keep our child alive, we sort of not really succeeded at parenting. But again, that's from old instinctual, we're trying to procreate and make sure our species lives on. But bigger than that is really that piece of, again, those little bits of pain, as much as we'd like them to avoid them, sometimes that's where their biggest growth is.
For sure.
And so, yeah, there is that piece. I love what Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson talk about, the push-in or cushion. Sometimes our children need a little nudge of, it's okay, and it might be challenging, but you can do it. I believe in you. And other times they need that cushion of, you can step back. You don't have to push so hard or try when this right now we can see that it evidently is just too much for you, and that both are okay. And
Yeah.
they come into play at different times. So
No, definitely. I think, yeah, being connected to their emotions on the inside, being in tune is really important. It's going to help you make those decisions. So I think we are about up on our time, trying to keep these to about 30 minutes. But I always like to ask if people want to come and learn more about you and about your amazing work, what's the best way for them to do that, Shonnie?
well, thanks for asking, Jennifer. So really the easiest way is to go to my website, which is shonnielavender.com, and it's SHONNIE, and then lavender, LAVNDER.com. So that's the easiest way. And I've got some Facebook groups and things like that they can find links to those on my website.
Beautiful. And we're also going to have a link and the email here as well for them to come over and get a special gift from you, I believe.
Yeah. And I'd love to, can I tell them just a little bit about
Yeah,
what that
definitely.
is? Just because sometimes it's like, what is this thing? So it's a webinar that I have. It's called Banish the Misbehavior, which I put in quotes, Banish the Misbehavior Blues. And it's my most popular webinar. And I think that is because it deals with three things that most parents find really frustrating. It's when our children behave in an aggressive way, when they are not listening, or when they're not following direction. But I take a spin on it that most people haven't heard of, and I really share what are we doing that we probably don't realize that we're doing that are actually making it easier for our children to actually either have those behaviors or for those behaviors then to escalate in ways that we don't want. So yeah, it's one of my favorites. And so if anybody's challenged by those three things, I hope they'll take a look at it and let me know what they think.
I love that. It sounds great, Shonnie. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. I hopefully our listeners learned some amazing, helpful little tidbits they can take away and try to apply in their parenting day. So thank you so much.
And if they don't apply well, then they can, it's okay. Just keep working at it and be forgiving of themselves. And I really appreciate getting the time to share these ideas and have a lot of fun talking with you about this journey as parents that we're on. So thanks for having me, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, it's definitely a journey of lots of trial and error.
Absolutely.
Thank you.